Hello and welcome to a Tolbert music tutorial. Today I'm going to be talking about the clarinet, everything that you need to know as a new beginner or the parent of a new beginner on this instrument. Okay, I'm going to dive straight in here, and the first thing you'll notice is that I'm on the floor. I recommend to everybody on every instrument, you always want to be opening your instrument on the floor. The clarinet is small enough that you might have the instinct to try to open it on your lap, but especially for our very small, very young students who are doing this, that is going to be a recipe for disaster. Always opening on the floor. All the cases are different. Some of them have zippers, some of them have buckles. I can't tell you exactly what kind yours is going to be, but you'll get it figured out pretty quickly and easily. There's no rocket science to opening these things. I'll show you the buckle style right here that I have. Pretty simple. You flip open the buckles, you pull this out of the way. You'll want to do that all on the floor so that it doesn't fly open. And then you open your case. If you're looking for the correct orientation so that the case isn't accidentally opened upside down and allowing things to spill out like this, you can see it's not the end of the world if you accidentally get it wrong. And a way to know that yours is in the correct orientation is to look for this logo on the outside. The logo will be facing up when the case is in the correct orientation. Sometimes, in rare cases, it's a little difficult to tell which way is up. Again, it's not the end of the world if you get it open that way. Now, I'm going to have it facing you so that you can see a little bit better what's going on once I open this case. It is normal to find several different things in here that are wrapped up in plastic, like my mouthpiece is. That is okay, that is normal, and you don't need this plastic at all. You can throw it away. I would start by going ahead and doing that. We'll talk more about these later. We'll just set them aside for now. As you're taking plastic off, just be sure that you're not too aggressive and that you don't run the risk of damaging any of the corks that are on the instrument. Those are really, really precious, and we need to be a little bit extra careful with them. Now, assembling the clarinet is one of the most difficult of the tasks for the early clarinetist. You're going to run into all kinds of problems with being able to get this thing together correctly. I just want to put that on your radar. It's totally normal. It's totally fine. I'm going to walk you through my favorite way to get it put together. You could go in a different order, but I think that this is just generally speaking a pretty good order to go in. I'm going to start with two different pieces called the mouthpiece and the barrel. This right here is the barrel. It's a relatively small joint of the clarinet that just has a hole on each side. One hole is a little bit bigger than the other. That's going to be the first thing that I take out and use to put together. And the other thing I'm going to use is this called the mouthpiece. This is one of those that I had to take out of the plastic earlier. This cap can be taken off and left in the case. And then this is the mouthpiece. This metal piece right here is called the ligature. You may need to loosen the screws a little bit in order to be able to take it off. And you're going to want to be very careful with this. It's flimsy, and I can just crush it right here in my hands if I compress my hands strong enough. These get stepped on in class, and they need to get replaced. They're not crazy expensive if something happens to it, but try to take care of your ligature. I'm going to set it very gently aside for now, and I'm going to get these two put together. Before I even bother trying to put them together, I'm going to take this piece of this cork grease that was in my kit to start with. It basically looks like chapstick. It actually is chemically similar to chapstick. It is a moistener that keeps these corks from rotting and from getting pulled apart when you put the instrument together. The corks, again, are very precious, and we want to take great care of them. And now you're just going to want to carefully put cork grease around the circumference of that cork. Okay, there's going to be a little bit of buildup on there, and that's okay. It's going to rub off as you put it on. Getting the mouthpiece into the barrel is really, really straightforward. You can't do it backwards because it won't fit. So if you try backwards, you just flip it around and go the other way. The correct way to get clarinet joints together is to begin the thread and then lightly push together and twist back and forth until it's in place like this. That's how it's going to go the whole way down the clarinet. Before we put the rest of the clarinet together, however, I want to show you how to put the reed onto this. Okay, so this is your clarinet reed right here. It's in a nice plastic case, which we're going to want to make sure we take care of because we have to put the reed back in this case when we're done so that it will dry out and that we won't grow mold on our reed. Yuck. So make sure that you set this plastic case somewhere safe, probably just right back in the clarinet case once you've taken the reed out. Now you're going to see here that this reed is very, 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 very thin. Please understand that even the smallest amount of damage that happens to this reed turns it into trash. If it's chipped in any way, if it's split in any way, you really don't want to be using it anymore. Your student's going to go through a lot of reeds at the beginning. It's okay, it's part of the deal, but it's very important that you try to handle these things really, really carefully, okay? When you first take them out of the case, you should really only be handling it by this thick end down here. If I even touch the thinnest part of the reed, I'm likely to destroy it and need to get another one. Now the reed is supposed to be made wet before we put it on the instrument, so I'm actually going to put it in my mouth real quick. I'm just resting it gently on my tongue. Flip it over, flip it around, flip it over and around. And that just makes it a little bit wet so that it's going to be able to vibrate correctly when we're trying to play the instrument. Now we have the mouthpiece and reed. We're going to pick up the barrel and mouthpiece, and we're going to get the reed as well. That's why I like to have this put together beforehand before I bother taking out my reed, and I like to have the barrel on it because it gives me more to hold on to throughout this whole process. So it's actually pretty important to go ahead and follow that instruction. There are technically other ways to go about it, but I'm promising you that putting this together first is a really good idea, especially for your beginners. Okay? So the clarinet reed has a flat side, and then it has this rounded side, and there's a big flat space on this mouthpiece right here. You just put the flats together. It's pretty obvious how that's going to go. I like to use my thumb down here on the bottom as something of an anchor to hold on to that reed. In order to line it up correctly, I'm using my fingers on either side like this to adjust it, and my thumb on the bottom to push up and down. I don't want to be touching the top part of the reed here because that's the really sensitive part that I'm extremely likely to break if I put my fingers on it. Okay? And what we want to see is that if you look at it straight on, you can see the top of the mouthpiece beyond it. You can see that little bit of black past the reed right there, can't you? And so that means that it is in the proper orientation. When that's the case, here comes back your ligature. Now, if you look really, really carefully at this thing, you'll see that it's tapered. One side is wider than the other. Okay, this side right here is actually a little bit skinnier than this side back here. And so it's meant to go over the top of the mouthpiece with the wider end first. I've got the skinnier end on top. You can sort of see that the wider end is on the bottom, and that's going to go over first. Most ligatures are like this one, and the screws face you. Sometimes you can even tell if you look at this right here, you're going to see that this part right here where the screws are is a little bit flatter because that's where it's supposed to be grabbing onto the reed. That's where the reed is supposed to sit. Some ligatures are leather and they only have one screw, and some of them are actually meant to be oriented with the screws facing in this direction. That's a lot more rare. It's going to happen, especially on some of the leather ligatures that you encounter, that it's supposed to be facing this way. But most ligatures that you encounter are meant to be facing in this direction. I'll help your student individually in class with the way that their ligature is supposed to be oriented. It's one of the things that I've always got my eyes on if they've done a good job putting this together in class. And so they're going to get a lot of extra help on it, but they're going to need to practice at home too. Okay, please notice that my ligature is down past this ridge of the mouthpiece. The most common error here is that students have the ligature up too high like this. And the reason that that happens is that they have the screws too tight. They start with the thing tightened all the way up, and then when they try to put it on here, it can't get down any further. So here's an example of that. We've got the screws tightened all the way, and we can't get down far enough onto the mouthpiece here, okay? If you just push down hard enough, you can actually hold the thing together, and you can even technically make sound. But it's choking the reed, and it's making it so that it's not going to be able to vibrate properly. I'll tell you what, in the first few classes, a few students are going to be playing like this, and it's okay because we can't fix every single little error that comes up. But when everything is put together exactly right, these screws actually start quite a bit looser. And when we pull down on the ligature, we're going to make sure that we pull it down past that ridge right here. Now, before I tighten the screws, you can see that my reed came out of orientation a little bit. I'm just going to use my fingers on the side again to get it lined back up just right and showing this much at the top. Okay, and we tighten down these screws, and now we have a mouthpiece ready to make sound. Okay, mouthpiece is ready. We're back over into our case. What comes next? So the next joint of the clarinet that we're going to need to use is this one right here. These two main body joints of the clarinet can be difficult to tell apart. Let me show you a couple of ways that we can tell them apart. This one right here has the logo on it. Okay, there's an etched logo right here. Almost all the clarinets that you have are going to have that etched logo at the top. Another way that you can tell is that this one has a single hole and this long key across the back. So this joint right here has a logo and has a single hole on the back. Whereas this joint over here has a pot of 4 keys, 4 flat keys on the front of it, and it has a thumb rest on the back of it. Now look, I've got great news. This doesn't fit anywhere else. This is the wrong spot. It doesn't fit, so you can't do it wrong. If you take a guess, you'll end up eventually getting it right by process of elimination. This is the wrong spot. It doesn't work there. It's pretty obvious. Oh look, it's going to fit right here. So by process of elimination, you can figure this one out. Cork grease. Make sure that you use cork grease. The first time you open these clarinets, you have no idea how long it's been since they've been greased up, and it is very important that you make sure that you put cork grease on them. If you use the corks dry, you're going to ruin the corks, and it can be a pretty expensive repair, so please be very careful. Now this is where having the barrel and the reed together makes a pretty big difference too, because when I'm putting the clarinet together, I don't have to grab onto the area where the reed is. I don't have to risk damaging this. I can use the barrel to mount it to the clarinet. It's the same as before. Start the thread and then twist and push. The alignment is such that this reed is lined up with this hole down here. That's the correct alignment. Next step, cork grease. I'm going to put this part on, and I'm going to put a lot of cork grease on this joint to make sure that it is well lubricated. The next body joint is the one that comes up. This is where putting the clarinet together gets the absolute hardest. It might be worth looking really carefully at the way that it's supposed to be oriented ahead of time. The front holes are going to line up like this. On the back, the thumb rest on this joint is going to line up with the hole on this joint right here. And that's the way that they're going to go together. Now let me get close and show you something that you need to be worried about while you put these together. These two keys right here that have just come into focus, these two keys, when I push together, are liable to run into one another. You can see that I got the one on top of the other like it's supposed to. But it is possible when you put these together for them to jam together like they're jamming together right now. I'm talking about these two keys right in here. These two keys right in here are supposed to overlap with one another. And when you're first putting it together, it's pretty easy to accidentally jam them. I'm going to zoom back out for you and show you that touching this one right here makes that key that we're worried about pop up and get out of the way. See, it popped up, it's out of the way. I push over here, it popped up, it's out of the way, and now I can put the clarinet the rest of the way together. And now those keys are lined up, and actually, when I push the correct button, you see the one lifts the other. That's how it's supposed to work. You can almost see on this key right here that it is designed for that other one to lay on top of it. It has this kind of notch that it's supposed to rest in, okay? And remember, I pop this, it gets it out of the way, and then I can rotate this one into place so that they're lined up. And now thumb guard and thumb hole, back hole are lined up over here, and all the front buttons are lined up there. Okay, last but certainly not least, we're going to put the bell on. Cork grease first. Cork grease first. Cork grease should probably be used maybe something like once a week. It kind of depends on how much you're practicing. If you're practicing enough, you should probably be using it once a week. You don't need to use it probably literally every single time that you play, and it'll start to become more obvious when you need it, just based on how difficult the clarinet is to put together. But when in doubt, put cork grease on it, because you really can't use too much. You're not going to have too much cork grease on it, but if you use the corks dry, you will wreck them, and it will need to get recorked, and that's expensive. It's not as straightforward as just getting out some glue and putting on any old cork. It's a nice, high-quality cork to make sure that the instrument is airtight while we're playing it, and so you got to be really, really careful about that. All right, if you followed all those instructions, you have a clarinet put together. Let's talk about how to make some sounds on it. So I want to talk about one more thing that's really important in building the clarinet. Building the clarinet is very, very, very hard. During the first few weeks of class, I go to all my clarinetists and I help them throw their instrument together as fast as I possibly can without taking a ton of other class time, right? I'm going to do my best to get it together so that they can play. There's a million other students with a million other issues to help at the very beginning, so we appreciate your patience, but we do try to give a little bit of extra help to the couple of instruments that are just really hard to put together, which include this one. And so your student might have to be patient with getting that help during the first couple of classes. More importantly, you got to watch this video and you got to practice putting it together at home. If you can get it put together all by yourself, then you don't need me to do it for you and you're ready to play with everybody else. I have she's a third grader now. She was a first grader when she started with me, a first grader who picked up the clarinet, and she was building her clarinet by the second week, and I hadn't even made these videos yet. It is entirely possible. It is well within the capability. She's a very smart young lady, but it is well within the capability of all of our students to be able to put their instruments together by themselves quite early on. They just have to practice it a few times. It's probably like 5 times putting it together and taking it apart before you go, oh, I kind of get it. And as long as you keep doing it somewhere in the near future so that you don't have days and days and days to forget about it, it's going to stick with you. All right, I'm not actually going to begin with the perfect clarinet hand position because I don't begin with that with the kids. I'm going to hold it properly while I'm playing, but I'm going to show you in a little bit exactly where the hands go. At the beginning, it's okay if they sort of randomly grab around the instrument. It's really okay. The left hand does go on top and the right hand does go on bottom. That's a great place to start. It's okay if you're pushing a few keys. It's okay if you're not pushing any keys at all. You just need to make sure that you have the thing secured while you're first trying to make your sounds. The right thumb does go under this thumb guard right here. That's a good way to like stabilize the clarinet and probably the best place to start in terms of where your hands go. But again, other than that, don't worry about too much. Okay, now let's talk about how we form our face while we put this thing into our mouth and try to make sound. When we do that, it's called embouchure. It's a French word, embouchure, and it means how we form our lips and face to play the instrument. We call the embouchure for clarinet a single lip embouchure. What that means is that we're going to cover our bottom teeth with our lip, like this. Like you're a granny, but only on the bottom. Okay? The most common mistake that I see happen here is students sticking their lip too far in their mouth, like this. You really just want to be covering it with the red of your lip. Like you're pretending to put on chapstick is the little trick that we tell them. Pretend you're putting on chapstick. The reed goes on that. The reed goes on the lip, like this. And there should be a little bit that's going to be up in your mouth, past the top of your lip like this. Okay? The teeth go on the top, and everything closes up around it. So lip, reed, teeth, close. It's really easy to overthink this at the beginning. We can fine-tune it It can be a little sloppy at first. It's okay if they just go, it's fine. Don't worry about it. We don't have to nitpick every little thing that they're doing with their embouchure at the beginning. They're gonna figure it out. It's gonna make sound when they do it right, and then they'll start repeating that a lot. It's a very trial and error type process. It's like a sport, throwing a ball or dribbling a ball. They're gonna fumble it a lot. It's gonna go wrong, and that's totally okay. So don't try to overcorrect. It's a great idea to patiently go through it once, see how close we can get it to right, and then just let it ride from there. And then maybe come back in a minute or two and say, hey, let's maybe try to make sure that you're covering your lip, because they'll forget and they'll start setting it on their teeth and it'll start squawking. Make some icky sounds when it's on your teeth like that. So it's because it's pinching it and it's making it vibrate in the wrong way. When your lip is covering it, making the sound is generally pretty easy. You shouldn't have a super-duper difficult time just getting sound out of the clarinet. If there's no sound coming out at all, like this, there's two very common possibilities. The clarinet is not far enough into your mouth. See, I'm stopping the reed from vibrating because it's not past my lip. I can't get any air into it because the air goes in right there. The air goes in right there, in that hole. And so if I close that hole, it can't go in. So that's the most common error. It's very common with my beginner clarinets. I'm just like, put it further into your mouth. And students are usually want to make too big of adjustments. They're gonna throw it really far in their mouth like this. And then it's gonna squawk big time because now the vibrations are too wide and crazy. And so then we have to teach, okay, smaller adjustment, not like this, but rather like this. Messing with a few buttons over here too. Not like this, but like this. Okay? And that's how you make the basic sound. The other reason that you might not be making enough sound, you might have the exact correct orientation, but if you're chomping down with your jaw, once again, you're just closing the hole. You're just closing that little itty bitty hole that the air is supposed to get into, closing it up like this by compressing too hard. So you don't pinch with your jaw. You don't want to be biting down. It's best to let our students experiment around with it. Let them try. Let them. It's all good. That is the first probably several weeks of learning the clarinet. There's really no issue with it at all. A lot of band directors, let me show you really quickly, will have you take actually the barrel back off of the instrument and they'll have you make sound like this. They say that it's allegedly easier to do it. I'm a doubter. I'm a doubter. I don't make my clarinetists do that. I do actually have that happen on the flute. I do find that it's a lot easier to make sound on only the head joint of the flute, but I just don't find that it's really a thing for clarinet, and I want them to get them playing their instrument that much sooner and practicing putting it together. Practicing putting it together. So that's how you get the embouchure formed and how you get the basic sound out. All right, so now let's talk about where our fingers actually go on the instrument. We're going to start, like I said before, with our right hand, and we're going to be aiming for this thumb rest on the back of the instrument. Right hand on the back of, under this thumb rest. They make really nice big fat pieces of rubber that go on this, a clarinet thumb guard, that when you're playing for a long time, a 45-minute rehearsal, and we're finally into the mode where we're just playing, this can get really uncomfortable. You can see that this clarinet came with a piece of foam kind of glued on there. That'll help a lot. Some of them are just exposed metal. That is really uncomfortable pretty quickly. And I do recommend going ahead for one of those nice big fat thumb guards. They're dirt cheap. You can buy like a whole bag full of 10 of them for like $2 or something on Amazon. They do also make neck straps for a clarinet that will come down around the thumb rest here. For a really young student, that might be appropriate. I've had one try before. You know, most people aren't playing with a neck strap for the clarinet, but it is a possibility. Okay, so the reason why I like to start with this thumb is because that's what really holds the clarinet. This is holding on to the clarinet. Let's assign the rest of the fingers going in order. The first finger that I actually like to assign a name is left thumb, and I call that thumb because your right thumb is irrelevant. Your right thumb isn't a real finger for the clarinet. It doesn't count as one of the assigned fingers because it's never going to push a button. It's never going to push in anything. So when I say thumb, I mean left thumb. Thumb. And it covers this hole right here. That's where thumb goes. 1 goes right here on this top hole, right on the opposite side of the clarinet to the thumb. So it's like you're pinching. There's thumb and 1, 2 goes over the next hole, and 3 goes over the next hole. Notice that this hole does not have any kind of a key overlay. So that's where 3 is. Those are thumb 1, 2, and 3. And then 4, 5, and 6 are on your right hand, and they cover the holes down here, 4, 5, and 6. So once again, we start with the right thumb because that holds the clarinet, and then it's thumb, which means left thumb, on this hole in the back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those are the different fingers that get assigned and the way that they get assigned on the clarinet. We are going to use our pinkies. We are going to use some of these funky side keys and what have you over time. But for the beginning, we're really just going to be using the fingers that are in these positions. The very first note that we teach out of the book is thumb 1 and 2. The other fingers, we're going to keep off of the holes, but we're going to keep them close by like this. They're not going to be flying up off in the middle of nowhere like this. They're going to stay close by so that when it's their turn, they can jump down onto the hole that they belong on. So thumb 1 and 2 with the other fingers not too far off. A clarinet's D, or what we call in class concert C. That's the first note that we like to teach to the clarinets. The next note is so easy. All you have to do is pick up one finger. All you got to do is pick up one finger, and you're on thumb 1. If this was thumb 1, 2, this note is now just thumb and 1. Thumb and 1, and that's making the clarinet's E. Or we also call it concert D. Clarinet E, concert D. And the third note, we take up the thumb, actually, and we have 1 only. And this is the clarinet's F sharp, or concert E. And once you have those 3 notes, we get to play some songs. So those are the first 3 that we're going to be teaching you. Really, the hardest part with the clarinet is getting it put together. That is by far the hardest part. The basic sound production is usually not so bad. Every student has a different journey here, but basic sound production is usually not so bad. And then getting the fingers into the right place, fortunately, there's a little bit of a map on the clarinet here for you in the fact that it has holes in it, and that's where you put your fingers. Let me go out of my way to tell you about covering those holes. You may have seen that when I'm laying my fingers down, they're kind of flat. Most instruments, we want them curled up like this because that allows us for more dexterity and precision, but with clarinet, we actually want them flattened out. And the reason behind that is that I'm going to push down a little extra hard and show you these circles on the fleshy, fatty part of my finger, because that actually helps cover up the hole. Covering the hole is not a matter of pushing down hard, it's a matter of mushing your finger around until you find that fleshy, fatty part that you can cover the entire hole with. It can be very challenging for some of our smallest kids because their fingers are just so small and skinny. And so they might have a little bit of trouble covering that hole. They can get it figured out. I've had first graders, tiny, skinny little first graders get it figured out. It is totally possible. It is totally possible. So don't be worried if that step happens to be a little bit annoying. It's normal for all clarinetists to have a little bit of trouble with that at the beginning. But the good news is that at least it's pretty obvious where the fingers are supposed to go. And then learning your first 3 notes, they're not complicated fingerings. They're not weird puzzles that you need to be using pinky keys and funny, awkward patterns or anything. It's thumb 1 and 2, pick up a finger, pick up a finger. And so once you've got that much down, actually, we're off to the races from there. Now the students are going to be in good enough shape that continuing to play and participate in class is just going to be a total breeze from there. It's like in a sport when they can finally dribble the ball in a way where they can look up and look around the court or the field and start to really understand the broader scope of the game. So that is not all for the clarinet. Let's talk a little bit about disassembly. Disassembly is actually really, really important on the clarinet as well. The first thing that you need to do is you need to get your reed case, and you should take your reed off. Remember how sensitive and breakable this is. Once you start taking it apart, it's really easy for it to bump into a desk or a whatever and for problems to occur. We don't want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the reed off first. I'm going to set my ligature aside safely, and I'm going to take this reed and I'm going to get it into the case, and I'm going to show you exactly how that's done. The case is designed with this opening for the reed to go in the end. It has these plastic little spring rods that are going to help hold it in place, and then the rest of it is vented. It's got holes on the other ends. You're going to see that this end is a little too small to get. You technically could get the reed in there, but that's not the right end to put it in. There's usually a bigger opening. Different brands have different looking reed cases. There's probably one of the most popular and best brand reeds. You actually kind of come in from the side. You line it up along the side, and then it tucks in. It tucks in from here. And this one, which is the brand that I end up the brand that I end up recommending. This is okay. You put the reed tip in first, and you get it just laying nice and flat on there like this. Okay, we're just laying it nice and flat. If you jam it in there, it's gonna get chipped and destroyed. So you lay it down nice and flat, slowly push it up in, and you'll be able to tell once you get about here, there's a little bit of resistance because these little spring rod things, these little plastic spring rods have been engaged, and now that's holding the reed in there. If this gets thrown around a little bit, the reed isn't going to fly out. Obviously, you want to be careful with it. But this helps protect from now any chips or damages, and it's also going to allow the reed to dry out because we just made it really wet in our mouth, and we don't want mold to grow on it. Reeds typically last around 1 month when you take really, 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 really good care of them. If you're practicing enough and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, about 1 month for these guys, and then they got to get thrown out. At the very beginning, I'm mostly worried about my clarinetists just having it together and like being able to make sounds. I'm not super worried about, is this reed ever so slightly damaged or whatever. I'm having to give up a lot in terms of what would be ideal for the reed situation at the beginning, and that's fine. They're total beginners, and we're just not super duper worried about it. But as we get just a little bit further along, we really want to start refining the practice. Ideally, what you should do is you should keep a Sharpie marker in your case, and you should write the date that you opened the reed in Sharpie on this plastic case right here. So today's 8/26. I'm going to put that on my reed. And now I know that this was opened today, and if in the middle of September I'm feeling like, my clarinet's sounding a little funny, I can check my reed case and, oh yeah, that one's probably getting a little bit old and it needs to get thrown away. Even if it looks like it's in great condition, it will eventually need to get thrown away. It's very much like a rubber band that's been overused. This holds a certain amount of tension, and every time you use it, it's like stretching that rubber band all the way out, all the way out, all the way, and eventually it's going to lose some of its strength, and it's going to be a very floppy rubber band, or it'll be a very floppy reed, and you aren't using the correct amount of air and air pressure and embouchure strength. That's all going to have to be balanced wrong in order to be able to play the clarinet, even if it can still make sounds. Maybe another good analogy is playing on a really flat soccer ball. If you have a soccer ball with just barely any air in it, that's like a very, very old kind of dead reed. And so after about a month, in the trash and get a new one. What would be the most ideal setup for all of my reed students is to have 2 reeds going at a time. So if you're organized, 2 weeks from now, get out a new reed and start the new reed and put the date on that. And now you can start going back and forth between them. Here's the newer reed, here's the older reed, here's the newer reed, here's the older reed, and you'll really start to be able to tell the difference. And when you get to around a month and it's time to throw this away, this reed becomes the older reed, and now you have newer reed that started, in October, hypothetically now, and you're going back and forth between those reeds. And so about every 2 weeks, you're cycling out 1 old reed and you're cycling in 1 new reed, and you really start to get an idea of what they feel like. I will have some students who fly a little under my radar, and I notice you've been playing on that reed for 2 or 3 months and it's sounding a little funny, and they put a new reed on and they're like, oh my gosh, I can barely play. I can barely play. So if you can help your student manage the whole reed thing a little bit, That's going to make a really, really big difference to their longer term success. Okay, so let's get back to disassembling the rest of the clarinet. Let's start by removing the mouthpiece. We're going to put the ligature back over the top of that. We're going to find the mouthpiece cap, and we're going to pop it in there like that. Some of your care kits will have come with a mouthpiece brush. You're going to want to make sure that you use that brush in here and brush it out from time to time. All right, now the rest of the instrument needs to get swabbed out before it gets disassembled and put back in its case. I'm going to tell you right now, I've tried to cut this section of the video about 10 times in a row because this swab, it was designed to have a little hole in here, and it was just pulling out, the string was just pulling out the hole over and over and over again. The swab that comes in your case is very frustrating, and it's kind of a piece of junk. I'm going to put a link in the description to a very nice silk swab. They're not very expensive. You're going to keep them for a long time, but until they get, nasty enough that you wash them, and then they're fine, and then and eventually you'll end up wanting to buy a new one, but they're not super duper expensive. They're all the same basic system. They have a weight on the end of a string that you drop through the clarinet. Sometimes it helps to stuff it in just a little bit so that it's got started, and then you pull the swab through the clarinet. You really only have to go one time. If you want to give it a second run, you're not going to hurt it, but you're really just going for any big extra moisture that's in there. The small stuff will evaporate out anyways, but any big moisture that is collected from condensation in your breath going through the instrument, you're making sure that it doesn't mold. Okay, let's get back to the floor so I can show you how it goes back in the case. Now for most instruments, this is straightforward. Enough that I don't bother with the putting it away thing, but with the clarinet, it is important that we take a quick moment to show how it's done. The order in which you disassemble is a little less important than the order that you put it together. That's mostly about protecting that one key and protecting the reed while you're putting it together. When you're taking it apart, we've already taken the reed off first, and so it doesn't matter so much which way it goes. The mouthpiece is pretty obvious, the bell is pretty obvious, the barrel is pretty obvious. You might have noticed I had to flip this around. If I try to put it in this particular case this way, it's a little too tight. It's okay to use pressure and try, but if it's going in too tight, try flipping something around. That's kind of part of why I'm showing you this part of the video. With this, gently pull and twisting apart, gently setting one down while I figure out where this one goes. You can see the shape of it here in the case. You can see that it tapers away right here where these keys are supposed to fit into the case. If you can't tell, if you're looking at it and you're thinking, oh gosh, I don't really know, try. It becomes relatively obvious once you've tried all the wrong ways. By process of elimination, it sits down nice and perfect like that. It's cut and built for it to sit down in there exactly like that, for it to feel like it's in the right spot. You can look for where the thumb rest is going to go. There's a hole back here. That's where the thumb rest is going to go. That's a good way to identify that one. But once again, you could, by process of elimination, try it in all the different spots, and it's going to go in there snug as a bug in a rug once it's in the correct place. If when you're trying to close your case, there's a lot of pressure, I can't get it closed, and there's a big gap here that you're having to put a lot of pressure on, it's probably because you don't have your instrument away correctly, and you might be at risk of bending one of these keys permanently by trying too hard to close it. So if you get to this point and you're having trouble latching, then don't rush. Go back, reorganize, and get it so that these close up nice and easy, like that. Okay, that concludes the video for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this helps you get a smooth start on clarinet this year. If you have any questions, if you have any feedback about things that you think that we should add to this video, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We would love to hear from you. Good luck, and we'll see you in class.